Still rolling.
Adam Winkler is professor of constitutional law at the UCLA School of Law. Thank you for joining us. So we've now sadly had another mass shooting in the United States, this one in Santa Monica, California. Does that affect the conversation over gun control in the United States?
I don't think the shooting in Santa Monica should affect the gun debate very much. Part of the reason why is because we focus too much on these mass shootings. These are high-profile events and they bring a lot of media attention. But mass shootings really constitute only a very tiny fraction of the gun deaths every year in America. The real gun problem in America is the 15,000 people who die every year from criminal gun violence and the other 15,000 people who die every year from suicides. We need better laws in place to see to it that the wrong people aren't getting their hands on guns, and we should be trying to lower the daily death toll from guns rather than try to prevent mass shootings, which at the end of the day probably can't be prevented. Norway has very extensive gun control laws. They had the worst mass shooting in human history a few years ago. I think our focus should be on reducing the daily death toll of guns rather than focusing on mass shootings.
And I take it that is a problem that should be addressed federally?
I think federal gun control laws are really the only gun control laws that are going to be as effective as possible. The problem with a state like California's gun control laws, we have very extensive gun control laws in California, and we've even barred, apparently, the exact weapon that was used by the Santa Monica shooter. The problem is that people can easily cross our borders, go to Nevada, go to Arizona, where gun laws are very lax. They can get a fake ID, just like any college student can, and go purchase their gun at a gun show or somewhere else where there's not going to be a background check. As a result, we know a lot of guns come over our very porous borders. So any one state's restrictive laws are undermined by the lax laws in neighboring states.
So you're a constitutional scholar. Can you give us the short version of the constitutional issues around gun control in the United States?
Well, so much of the constitutional issues revolve around the Second Amendment to the Constitution, of course. Second Amendment, as people often know, it says a well-regulated militia, comma, being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, comma, shall not be infringed. It's almost as if James Madison, the writer of that provision, had just discovered this wonderful new thing, the comma, and wanted to put it in there as many times as possible. And it's really bedeviled Americans ever since, but it hasn't so much bedeviled the courts. Over the years, the courts have long recognized a right of individuals to have guns for personal protection. If not in the Second Amendment, then in state provisions, constitutional provisions protecting the right of people to have guns for personal protection. At the same time, the courts have traditionally upheld most forms of gun control. Courts will say that so long as the right is not completely denied, only regulated, then the law will stand. And I don't think the courts are the major legal impediment to gun control laws. I think it's the legislatures. That's where the NRA is much stronger.
Tell us about NRA influence in the gun control debate.
Well, there's no doubt that the NRA is one of the most powerful political forces in America. And any debate about that really is just a debate about how exactly they exercise their power, whether they do it through money contributions to candidates or whether they're doing it by bringing out voters on Election Day. I tend to think that the reason why the NRA is as powerful as it is not just because of money, but because it can swing votes. And in closely contested elections, elected officials don't want to take on the NRA because they're concerned that those pro-gun, die-hard voters are going to vote on the gun issue, whether it's a prominent issue or even a live issue at all in the campaign. They're going to vote for their pro-gun candidate. As a result, a lot of candidates don't want to be seen as anti-gun.
Back to Santa Monica for a minute. The suspect in this case, who has been identified by the police, could have been carrying as many as 1,300 rounds of ammunition. How does ammunition fit into the gun control debate?
Increasingly, we're seeing more lawmakers focus their attention on control of ammunition rather than control of guns. In one sense, that's not likely to make a huge difference in the gun debate. The Supreme Court has said that the Second Amendment guarantees you a right to have a fully functional firearm, which means obviously that you have a right to have ammunition as well. But we might have laws on the books to either raise the cost of ammunition to offset the costs that come from gun violence, Or even as California's laws have recently been revised to reflect, to require background checks for people who buy ammunition. One of the difficult things of regulating ammunition is that if we see someone with 1,300 rounds of ammunition, we think, oh, that guy must be a mass shooter. But the truth is, if we had a database of all those mass ammunition purchases, it would be filled with mostly false positives. Anyone who's an enthusiastic shooter as a hobby is going to run through hundreds and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. And so it's not rare for someone who's an avid shooter to go through 1,300 rounds of ammunition. Spend an hour on a gun range and you'll go through 100 rounds pretty easily.
So that's not the red flag that would trigger any solution to this problem.
Well, it could be a red flag. The problem is it'll be in a sea of other red flags that are false positives. It'd be very difficult to pick out the right person. But of course, there's always the Chris Rock approach to gun control. He said, charge a $10,000 tax onto ammunition, and people won't fire those guns at all.
Professor Winkler, your book, Gunfight, The Battle Over the Right to Bear Arms in America, is going to be published soon in paperback. Tell us a little bit about the basic premise of the book.
Well, the main argument that the book makes is that we've always had gun control in America, that we often think of gun control as a modern 20th century invention, and the NRA presents gun control as a violation of the Second Amendment. But the truth is the Founding Fathers had gun control laws, the Wild West had the most restrictive gun laws in the nation, that gun control is as much a part of the story of guns in America as the Second Amendment and the six-shooter, and that we can have both the right of individuals to have guns and good and effective gun control laws to keep the most dangerous people from getting their hands on the most dangerous weapons.
Thank you.
Thank you.